Welcome to Real Estate Dads. Once again, we will be discussing the intersection of real estate life and dadding life. Today, we have Angel Gonzalez, the founder of Keystone Capital and father to three daughters, 1, 2, 3 years old at some times of the year. He got into real estate full time only 3 years ago and currently has $100 million under management that he has GP'd on. He came from the automotive executive world, so his business has grown, accelerated real quickly, and he's never done a bad deal. So this is great stuff that we're going to learn today, and we're also going to learn some really cool parenting tools that involve jars and gummy bears and quarters. Can't wait to share all this wonderful information with our audience. Angel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Well, I'm Angel Gonzalez. I'm with Keystone Private Capital. For me, my background is pretty interesting because I'm in commercial real estate now. That's not how it started. I started out with banking for the first part of my career, almost about a decade doing that at a higher level. Pretty much by the time I was 30, I was one of the more up and coming young banking guys, I think, in my world. And then that kind of was interesting because then I got kind of looped in and asked if I'd be open to coming and being a finance director for an automotive group that was one of the largest ones in Midwest. And so it took a little bit of time, but the compensation and all the things that they told me about the high energy, the people made sense. So I did that. And next thing you know, I kind of took that role, and then they made me a general manager at one of the top Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram stores in the country. And from there, it just kind of kept parlaying into more opportunities. But throughout that whole time, I always did like single family residentials as rentals. Then I did office when I got into commercial, and then transitioned to industrial. So I feel like my background is really heavy in like understanding not only everything from modeling, business practices, but I'm become more kind of like a COO type of a function for a lot of the things that I do. And so it's just been quite the ride, but it's been pretty exciting.
Fantastic. And what about the kids?
Man, I got 3 girls. I'm a girl dad. So I have a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old in like 2 weeks. So it's even like
1, 2,
more.
3.
Was that? Yeah. Well, like the thing about it is they're like all within like 13 to 18 months off. So like, but there is this moment in time, August 1st, where it'll be 1, 2, 3, which is absolutely awesome. I'm super pumped, but being a girl dad to 3 girls, especially that are that curious, that exciting, and that young, and it's been quite the racket, especially when you are an entrepreneur. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, man. Mine are 1 and 4, both girls.
Hey, another girl dad. I love it, man.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's huge. It's a whole, hey, I don't knock dads that have boys, but I will tell you, if you're only a girl dad, it's kind of a different gig, from all the
Totally
conversations that I've had. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a boy dad and a girl dad. So I got one
Okay.
each. Yeah. And my daughter is just 3 months. So we're still getting into the difference. I know she's super new.
Oh, that's new.
Yeah. In fact, we were on a podcast when my wife went to labor 3 months ago. So
No way.
yeah.
So you're like, do you cut the podcast off? Do you continue?
No, that's one of the beauties of having 2 hosts, Trevor was just able to just continue. Like we didn't miss a beat.
Oh, that's great.
That is true. Yeah, we finished the episode.
Oh man, I love being in a room with dads that all have girls and a guy.
Yeah, 1 boy.
Yeah. I usually do this in my office, but you guys caught me in a work meeting day where I took the work meeting at the golf course.
There you go. Hope was it productive?
Oh yeah. Yes, it was. I would tell you it's a lot of it sounds weird, but I never thought that golf would be so pertinent to my business, but a lot of my deals get done there.
That's great.
Really?
That's great.
Yeah.
How did you get into like starting just to get into golf and get into that world of making business happen on the golf course?
It's actually, it happened by accident. It was my junior year of college where I started, was because my roommate was on the college golf team. And so it was kind of one of those situations where I just kind of like leveraged him and his knowledge. And he was like, I need someone, especially on the days when he wanted to go practice and he needed somebody. I was just there I think of it as a pincushion or whatever for him to beat on and feel good about himself. But I did that. But then what happened was, as I was getting into banking, I started like when you kind of, especially because I was younger than most of the people that were in the leadership positions, and so I would actually go and talk to them and be like, "Hey, you guys want to go to grab a drink or whatever?" And I could tell that it would off-put some people when I did it like that. As soon as I transition, like, "Hey, you guys want to catch up, maybe do a golf round," people start saying yes, which is interesting because they end up drinking at the golf course. I just want to be clear about that. So they all of a sudden made me feel like I was the crazy guy asking to have a drink, but then all of a sudden I go to a golf course and they're like, "Can I get a sixer?" And I'm like, "Calm down." So ever since then, I just kind of always leveraged like the ability, especially like it was three of these guys were from a cap event that we had here in Denver. And so we kind of put it together a couple of weeks down the line and we got to talk and now it feels like we might be onto something. So it's a good way to leverage, especially when you want to talk to someone for about 3 to 4 hours. And it's not like off-putting to sit because I always say it in two ways. The first part is I like it because everyone's guards down and you just start talking naturally and you don't have to worry about like who's selling me what. You're golfing. The second part I like about it is that it also is like a long period of time because most of the times it's 18 holes. That's 4.5 hours that you just get to sit side by side and talk through anything. And that's actually how I got my brother his job last year. I helped him do the contract, did it through my buddy right there on the golf course. Everything happened. I'm like, go show up for an interview. Bye. So.
Oh, good.
That makes a lot of sense.
I found that with golf, you get guys who it's a business meeting. If you're going golfing, it's a business meeting, but you get to have fun. So, whether it's drinks or whatever else, and there's a lot of guys who are able to play that sport and not have to have it. But, you're able to have a conversation. You're playing basketball, you're not really talking mid game, even pickleball. Yeah, you're huffing and puffing, So with golf, you're able to go out and it's a long time, 4-hour game. So, it's definitely something I wish I was better at. My issue with golf is that, what I've been told is that this is apparently a forever issue, but that with golf, since you can always get better at it, you're always a little bit frustrated at your game. Like no matter what, even if you're playing good, you're still like, oh, I should have, there's this still effort to improve on it. But hey, let's get into the business stuff a little bit. In regards to your background, so let's hear about the life changes. So how was the first life change with your first daughter when she was born, and what were you doing in your career at that point?
Wow. So my first daughter was a COVID baby. So that was a unique time period because I was an executive at that point. And so one of the things for me, especially during that time, I was kind of nervous about kind of what my future looked like because I was working on average anywhere from 10 to 14-hour days. And that was like hard. And that could easily be 6 days a week. And so when you think about that from that standpoint, and I had her, I was really conflicted as a dad because I was like, if I stay in the trajectory I am, I'm going to miss every moment. Like I'm going to miss all the things. And it quite frankly was my first, I think, fork in the road in my career where I had to say, I've made other career changes that were big, but they were more linear in the sense of like the roles weren't that different. This one was a lot like one of those situations where I'm like, this is not impacting the role. This is impacting like my future, my life, like my relationship with my wife. And I knew that, and she actually, my wife is a management. She's in management for the number one wealth management firm in the country. So you can think about two people that are very much workaholics, high enders, really working their butt off to kind of climb that corporate ladder. And we both kind of had that come to Jesus conversation. We're like, are we sure this is going to be the right path as we continue to build out our family? Especially we took the long road. We took the medical route to have our kid. We actually were the kind of family that was told that we wouldn't be able to have kids. So when you go through, so we went from that challenge where we were already like challenged in our marriage because we were like, wait, what do you mean we can't have kids ever? And then my wife's like, oh my gosh, is this going to mean all these other things? Divorce or not having the right relationship, adoption. You can imagine all type of things are on the table. So now our first daughter's here. We decided, we were like, actually it was kind of funny. I know it to the day because it was in February. That's our key, our date that we unlock our phone. But it's one of those things that we took that date and it made a moment where we said, this is the day we're changing the trajectory. And that's when we started to really focus in on commercial real estate because we knew that it would allow us the opportunity to eventually get more passive in our lifestyle. And we knew we also were looking at having anywhere from 3 to 4 kids. And that was on our purview, especially now that we had one. Now, they told us we couldn't, But now we did the medical route in the first, and we didn't do it in the second and third. So it worked out well. But that was probably the biggest first sacrifice we had to make, was they're in our first child.
And now you got 3.
Yeah, now I have 3.
Now you got 3. So, please talk as openly as you would like regarding that. But, that's something a lot of people don't really discuss is, challenges getting pregnant. And I've heard about it way more as a dad than I ever did prior to being a dad. Where personal friends of mine were like, hey, like this occurred. And it's like, oh my God, things you never realize other people are dealing with.
Yeah, it's
apparently. I learned that you're not supposed to, when you encounter a married couple that doesn't have any kids, you're not supposed to ask them when they plan on having kids, apparently.
I could see how that could go south if it's the wrong couple. I will say that. Sorry. But I will also say this is that I was shocked how after the fact, so my first child, it took us almost 5 years of like going through all the process. And I mean, we went through like 5 rounds of IUI, and then we did the 1 round of IVF, and we did we did all the needles, you name it. And the thing that was interesting was, I kid you not when I say this, before we got to our last round, I'm walking out of the clinic and I'm walking down the hallway, and one of my family lifelong friends is walking by the other way down the hallway, and we knew where he was going. I knew where I was coming out of. We never said a word to each other, and we never have talked about it to this day. And that was many years ago. That was a travesty, because ever since then, one of the things my wife and I have done have been very vocal about our experience, especially how lonely it is, especially for the guys. People don't realize that guys don't have a whole lot of support there in these challenges. And so it's one of those situations where we started becoming that for other people. And we were quite shocked how our inner grouping of friends, especially in our close group friends in Minnesota, once that we told them their story, they're like, hey, we're going through this. And they started calling my wife. And I will tell you, 2 of them went through the process while consistently reaching out to our household. And it was one of those things that if we never came out, we don't think we ever would have heard anything. And you have to understand, the thing that was kind of sad about it, at least from my perspective, is the fact that everyone that was going through this that we know were people that did it or try to do it the right way. They went to school. They did the whole, I take the job. You think you're playing the game the way it's kind of intended in a sense. And then you're challenged. And one of them, quite frankly, kind of took the whole, maybe God hates me, that whole approach. But now that's no longer that mindset. But that was a really eye-opening experience about how many people are dealing with things like this, and it's not even really talked about.
Yeah, it's not. I'm saying yes, but no, it's not talked about. I've had a couple of friends where, they've told me about just some really horrible experiences they've gone, where they go to their first appointment with the doctor, and it's almost one of those things, to back to what Trevor was saying. You don't ask. You don't want to ask because you don't want to inquire for a potentially bad answer, because it's almost rude. You want to support them.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to know how you're doing. I really want to be an advocate for what you're going through. And instead you unintentionally are inquiring about a really
touchy subject.
Very.
Yeah, it is. And I will tell you this, and this is to anyone out there, talk about it more. I think that the when some people say, less is more, this is not that situation. To me, it's actually the opposite. The more people talk about it, the more they get through that first generation of conversations and not taking it personal and being able to be open to that, they're going to see that the support, the way that people actually kind of gravitate towards being a really good building out a really good ecosystem for long-term success. Plus, it's usually people that are really that I've, at least from my encounters, have been really high-end professionals that are going through this. So why wouldn't we conversate more? Why wouldn't we lean on each other when we all know that we all are working so hard on the other side of our parts of our lives? So come together. And that would be one thing I think we could definitely have done differently. And I would never wish to go through that experience again in silence again. I think that was probably my worst mistake I made.
I think that's one thing, and we've talked about this previously on the show before, but with a lot of parenting, the first time you go through it is always the hardest.
Yeah.
Whatever your kid's doing or whatever the experience is, and even yours, I would call that, probably the first parenting experience is, that one probably. But you handle them better as you get old, as you go on. And now you are that beacon. So you can talk to guys and you're able to talk about it on our show, which I'm actually really glad. This is not a topic we've actually had on this show. So I appreciate you being honest about it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So what does your days look like now, Angel? I mean, you transition from the high level, automotive executive to real estate entrepreneur in just like the last 3 years now, you know, since COVID,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. About four. Yeah.
So what is your, what does a typical day look like for Angel?
It's interesting you say that because it's a lot different than my days used to look like before. I felt like my days were kind of like ran me, where in a little ways I kind of dictate a little bit of my day. And what I mean by that is, as a dad, one of the things, especially when you are challenged to have a kid, you become very intentional about a lot of things. You start really thinking through like and for me, I'm one of those guys who I believe in reverse engineering things as best as possible. So I'm like, okay, what is a great dad? What does that look like? What do I think a good dad would do? And when I started thinking about that, it was kind of funny because I never had that thought before, right? Like that never was even in my stratosphere of thinking. Because I always thought about my career as kind of like my badge of honor. That was kind of like my thing growing up. Was I've always wanted to be the first, the fastest. I got mad when I got beat out for valedictorian. Like you name it, I've been that guy who gets really like competitive. And so it's one of those situations that when I actually look at my day to day now, it's like the first things in the day I do is usually cook breakfast and hang out with my daughters for about an hour and a half. So like my daughters are notorious for waking up at 5:45. Quite frankly, is my biggest pet peeve. Because I
Same.
know that like
Same.
I'm like
I want to get work done in the morning. Can you please sleep in just a little bit? 'Cause
just a
I'm already
little.
up, but like, no.
like just give me a 6 in front of it. That's all I ask. Like I'm not asking a whole lot. 15 more minutes. But now it's because I wake up around 5:45. I take that time. I go down. I get to hang out with them. I cook them breakfast, especially his dad. Like I'm the guy who I call it the bookend. I cook breakfast and I cook dinner. Like that's kind of what I do. So I try to be done with I try to start my work day somewhere after 8 o'clock, just because I really believe in that family dynamic time. And then at the end of the day, I usually try by like 5 o'clock, 4:30 on the early days, but it's usually more 5:30. I spend that time with my daughters again. So I kind of go ahead and do the whole cooking, cocoa melon, bath time, all that stuff. But I think that that was important for me because those are the two time periods I didn't have before in my career. I really didn't. And it was kind of one of those things where it became foreign to me to like wake up and be like, wait, it's 8 o'clock and I'm not at a building yet, or 7 o'clock, I'm not at a building. So that was kind of unique. Then from there, I usually just head right into the office. I really try to knock out a lot of the administrative stuff by 9:30. That's kind of my goal, is like 9:30 administrative stuff done, vendor or any type of things when we talk about like radon or talk about surveys or all the little minutia stuff. Like I give a 9:30, 10 o'clock deadline. Like after that, it's really about meetings, trying to make sure I'm eating with somebody in some capacity, or having coffee or whatever that looks like. And then a lot of times my afternoons can really bog into like it used to be more underwriting stuff. Now I don't do the underwriting as much. So it's really about focusing on like the business growth, trajectory, partnerships, all these different things is kind of what my afternoon lies. And for me, especially, I actually, because of the different entrepreneurial things that I'm doing between partnerships and running our own firm, I tend to have to now break them up into days, because that was really challenging, like starting especially like a week like last week, where it was like a different meeting for a different business line every like throughout the day, and my brain was like, I don't even know where I'm at anymore. So that's one of those things I try now to be more strategic about. But for the most part, is administrative morning, meetings in the afternoon is kind of my day, and making sure that I bookend my daughter's time.
What's breakfast and what's dinner?
Cool, man.
Man. For the record, breakfast usually consists of high-end meats. My girls are all about the sausage and the bacon. So I have to, like, they want a full-fledged breakfast, man. They want the yogurt. They want the fruit. Like, and it's my own fault, man. I should have started out with just giving them like a bowl of cereal and being good. But Dad was like, I'm going to make this like I'm Martha Stewart with a guy. And next thing you know, now I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm like stuck for my rest of my life, because now they're like, Dad, I want some steak. I'm like, whatever happened to chicken nuggets?
You set an expectation there, man.
You did. I like hearing the stories of what the kids eat. My son's a super picky eater, and he gets a waffle with strawberries and whipped cream, and I whip the whipped cream with heavy whipped cream in the morning. because he's such a
Ooh.
picky eater, and generally he skips dinner. He's like a fruitarian. We can't get him to eat meat.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, we keep trying. We're eating in front of him, and I mean, your breakfast sounds pretty great. I'm a good cook, just on a side note. And I was just like, it's just not happening. But he eats. We went to a restaurant and he had a waffle with whipped cream and berries and he ate it. And my wife and I were like,
You found gold because that's a big deal.
yeah. So anyway, but
I don't know how a kid could not like meat. I don't get it.
you know,
I know, right?
we'd be a little more patient about it if we thought. Well, I mean, we have to be patient. We don't really have a choice in the matter. But he, you know, one thing if he tried the food and spit it out, he just wouldn't even try it. Like, no joke. It was like with chicken nuggets. It's like, should we put him on a plate or should we just like leave him around the house and then wait for him to get him and put him in his mouth and see that he likes it? I mean, we joked about this, you know, like how can we get him to try things? Because, you know, we'll make this food and we'll put it out. He just doesn't even want to he just doesn't even want to taste it. Doesn't even want to try. So,
You ever did you ever try like, cool, I mean, when you get hungry enough, you'll eat it. And until that's eaten, you don't get
you know, we've read some of these things about, you know, I mean, it's to be honest, it's kind of starving your kid, you know, where you're supposed to not provide food.
starving.
Yeah. I mean, the argument that you're making
You mean
is
you make
is
them
that
hungry?
you provide food at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's it. And if they're eating all their food during that time, you want to snack in between, that's okay. But you're not supposed to kind of ruin the meal by, you know, giving them a milkshake at 3:00, you know, before dinner, and then skip their dinner kind of a thing. So, and my wife and I have been debating that, but it's not exactly like he's a big snacker either. When I say fruit, apples, watermelon, cantaloupe, blueberries, kid eats blueberries like it's his job.
So you've been debating on whether or not not letting your kid eat additional food until they finish what you gave them. That
No, it'd be like, no. Well, I mean, we're just on side notes and listening. We haven't done this yet, but it would be that lunch is lunch. Here's your lunch, you know. And then if he says no to lunch, then there's just no food again until dinner. New dinner. We wouldn't be like, oh, here's your lunch again, you know. But then it'd be dinner, and then we would, you know, that would be the process for it. And I haven't, you know, gone into how much we want to, you know, do this yet, you know, and I've heard of other families that are extra strict with food where, you know, it causes food anxiety for kids, you know, where the parents are, I knew some marathon running triathlete parents, and they were really strict on wanting their kids to be skinny. They had a health issue and they were kind of putting some anorexia on the kids. We didn't tell them this, but that was kind of how it was. They would lock the cabinets. And when the kids would go to other people's houses, if they'd be given a snack, and if they dropped the snack like on the ground, that would cause like a meltdown because, well, I'm not going to get any more food. You know, this is the only food that I was going to be given. So eventually, some of the other parents in that circle talked to the parents about it, and they changed some of those things.
But that's a little bit different.
That's
right?
like,
aggressive. Yeah, you know, like here's the food you can eat, and you can't eat something until it's finished. That means that when they finish it, they could potentially, because like what you described, this is breakfast, this is lunch, this is dinner. And if you don't finish it, you don't get anything else. Like that's generally what we do. And if they finish all their dinner, I'm happy to give you food until you stop eating.
Yeah.
Like this is all you'll get.
Yeah.
Period. No, you don't get anything else until this is done.
Oh, you should see the meals we've made. Oh, we've gone to so many lengths trying to find out, you know, what we could feed him, you know. So I don't know, we'll figure it out.
I gotta tell you, I'm kind of in a part envious a little bit because like I have the opposite problem where like, especially my 1-year-old soon is like, she has no teeth. All my kids had teeth by 1. My 1-year-old has no teeth, but if you don't give her meat, she will like chuck her food. And you're like, what are you doing? Like this morning I gave her yogurt and like cereal and some stuff. And she looked at the other ones with sausage and I was like, oh snap, this is coming. And I ran, man. Like I got afraid as a parent. Like, why am I afraid?
Dude, I was so shocked at how little importance teeth are when I saw my kids start eating whole foods.
Yeah.
Like they'd have no teeth, just like you said, and they would just be eating chips. Like, cause our kids eat what we eat. This is what we're eating. You can have as much of our food as you want. Right. It's like generally our approach. And they're freaking eating the chips, the meat, everything. No teeth. Just like, they take my finger and bite it. And I'd be like, ow.
Yeah. You're like, where did this come from? It doesn't even seem like it's real. But you know what? They figured it out. I now know that you cannot have teeth and be just fine. I prefer to have them though. Just start them.
Yeah, right.
I will comment one story about my son. And we're looking forward when he's got more friends that they're eating together. So he sees other kids eating, but he's really good buddies with his uncle, and his uncle was eating a Slim Jim. He wanted some Slim Jim. We didn't think he'd like it. He did. He was probably only a year at that time. And now, if we're ever at some place that has Slim Jim somewhere, my son will be like I want that Slim Jim. And those are and those flavors are like jalapeno lime. I mean, I hadn't had a Slim Jim since I was like a kid. It was just the weirdest thing that he was into that. But
so do we call the Slim Jim now the new gateway? Is that what it is?
Other food, yeah, we'll find out. So getting back on topic a little bit here.
Yeah.
So you had the kids, you and your wife made this decision. You're like, hey, we want more free time. And let's fast forward. Tell us about the accomplishments. What's in your portfolio? What deals do you do? And let's let the listeners hear about your authority in the market.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because it was very challenging at the time because, again, we went right into office right around COVID. Go figure. Now, this is also because we had partnered with someone that had already done office at that point for about three-ish years. They had seen some success. So we decided to partner with them. It was definitely one of those partnerships that, looking back at it, had a lot of value add, but it wasn't the right partnership. But at the time, I'm glad I did it because sometimes one of the things that I think people do is they always wait for everything to be perfect for them to jump and make the move. I think that's to the detriment in a lot of ways. Sometimes you just got to go. And quite frankly, more people should just go. So going from that point, we moved. Actually, our change was massive because we knew we wanted to do real estate and do it at the way we were thinking about. So we moved our family from Minnesota to Denver at the same time. So we said, we're going to change careers and we're going to also move to Denver. That is not normal, especially when you have a girl, a one, at that point, I think she was 1 year old and her sister was just 3 weeks old when we moved to Denver. And so we moved not too long thereafter, call it like 6-7 months right after we got our first office, our first building in the city of Golden, Arvada area in Denver.
Still office.
That was our office. That was the last office project we did. Subsequently, since then, we have moved into industrial. We have partnered on car washes. We done multifamily in Nebraska. We right now are looking to break ground in Colorado Springs, in Minnesota. So it's been kind of a nice little runway. Now, not where we wanted to be exactly in some aspects, but in other aspects, we were very fortunate that we never got into any bad deals really. And so that was also one of the things. So we weren't those people that were one of the things that's nice about when you're talking industrial office, the game is a little bit more of a long game than multifamily. So we never had that pressure. Some of these multifamily folks around the country that we knew that were so we're going to give you all your returns within 2 years. And you're like, wait, what? I'm a risk averse kind of guy, especially coming from banking. I think about risk, as if it's my own in every aspect. Every card of risk factors, I look at it can be mitigated depending on what you have on the other end. Anything can be risky, but anything can also be de-risked if it's done right. And so I look at the world through those lens. And for us, it was kind of nice because of the deals that we did and the people we partnered with and the things that we've been involved. We now, I think, have in our grouping somewhere around, I think when I last saw it was just shy of 100 AUM. And then we also have quite a bit in the pipeline and quite a bit of square footage. Right now, our targets is to do somewhere around 1 million square feet of industrial annually. That's kind of what, from an acquisition standpoint. I don't do the doors things like multifamily. So if anybody ever asks me what a door is in any aspect, I am not your guy. I deal in square footage and triple net leases, which is one of my favorite things because that was one of the things that I was challenged with being in office when we started, was that we were really focused on gross leases and modified gross. And I would tell you, for anybody who lives in that world, you're responsible for so much. If you come to the side of industrial or self-storage or other things along in those asset classes, what you'll find is you essentially are responsible for everything outside of the building, for, I just want to make sure the building is right, the structure's right, the parking lot's right, whatever. But when it comes to taxes, when it comes to all the capital expenditure stuff, like a lot of it falls to the tenants, not to us. And so that was unique.
And on one of your industrial deals, can you give us a rundown of what it looks like for investors? You do bring on investors, correct?
Yes.
And what does that look like for investors? So people who are listening, what is a typical offering look like? What's a hold period look like? And how do you mitigate risk? What does the debt stack look like?
Yeah, so great question. I think a couple of things you have to make sure. So when you're dealing in industrial, make sure the location matters. The first component of it is that if you're not by a port, a highway, some kind of infrastructure which allows movement from a logistics standpoint to be easy, it is a problem. So I don't care how great the building and the numbers supposedly look, if you are in the wrong location where you cannot logistically move around, you make it harder for truckers, you make it harder for goods to move around. And quite honestly, the other thing we think about is we think about storage in a very high capacity. Clear height matters or yard outside matters. So that's one of the things we think about first. But how we normally look at, we like to typically play in about 50,000 square feet or more. The reason why 50,000 square feet or more typically are going to be with clear heights of that 20 feet or more. Usually 20 feet to 24 feet of clear height matters from a standpoint of you moving machinery within inside of a building. So that's why we think about it from that standpoint. We typically like to focus on buildings that are going to be that have a lot of upside from an opportunity of square footage, dollars per square foot. We like to buy around $100 per square foot. We like to exit around $175 per square foot if possible. We truly try to, especially in Denver right now, Denver has exploded. So if you bought right, you're looking at square footage going as high as $225 a square foot from an exit strategy. Our hold periods, we typically look at leases. We like to do leases on a 5-year term with a 5-year renewal. So typically, and then on some of them, we are fortunate that we have some that are 10-year leases. One of them right now that we have talked about is looking to be a 10-year with a 10-year renewal. So so that's one of the nice things about industrial is your whole period of time is on average 5 to 7 years, if not 10 years. Your leases are that in those alignments. So yes, the hold periods are longer than you would incur in some of the other asset classes, but the stability and the fact of I would say the volatility is mitigated right off the bat because the asset class in itself is one of those that I call it more the steady Eddie. We usually try to get the debt somewhere around 60 to 65% loan to cost. And so not loan to value. So LTV, you guys, for those that are listening, LTV, it's great. But loan to cost is taking construction and CapEx things into consideration when you are looking at that. Sometimes lenders right now will let you get up to about 70% loan to cost with regards to being able to exercise some of these deals. So that's kind of where we like to position ourselves. We're right around that 65. The rest we usually do from a capital raising and then our own dollars as well. So we like to try to say that we are in every deal ourselves. We try to make sure that we come in somewhere around that 5% mark is kind of where the partnership comes in at typically. And then the rest we raise from our investors at that point. Again, we are always looking to do somewhere around 2 to 3x on the money. We usually have we call it for us, we say when I first started, we were probably saying closer to 8% cash on cash. We really are seeing 6% cash on cash, but on some of our projects, the ground up developments like the car washes, those are more in alignment with that 10% cash on cash. So that's kind of one of the things that we like is so now we're looking at more ground up development as well, because it does afford us some better economics. So that's kind of the trajectory of kind of what we look at and how we buy and how we like to put the capital stack together.
Fantastic.
And you said you have 100 million AUM, and that's those are assets that you're GP'd on, I suspect.
Correct.
And where are they located?
We are located. So we have it's in Nebraska, Minnesota, Colorado, and in San Antonio.
And how are you sourcing deals?
Man, in the beginning, I felt like it was me being like the guy who wore the boots on the ground hat, pretty hardcore. I would source them a lot by doing. So we started actually. One of the things that we did, which was great about my old partnership, is we were really about trying to get deals off market. So we actually used to use a system that allows us to really target the GIS of certain areas specifically, and we would mass market from a standpoint of letters to everybody in the area, and then we would go ahead and once. And it's kind of funny because when you do that, I'm not a real estate licensed professional. I am an investor, which was a really critical component of doing what we're doing. The reason why I say it like that is that I was getting phone calls then from brokers being like, hey, you're talking to my clients or you're trying to do all this stuff. And they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, why can't I? And they're like, oh, wait a minute, you can, because I'm not breaking anything. I don't have a license, so I don't have to go through that protocol of dealing with that.
Would it matter if you did anyway?
In some aspects, it's kind of like an unspoken rule. Like
You want to do business with them later. It's kind of rude,
You
right?
could get your license revoked.
yeah,
Theory, I think it's
in certain areas, yeah.
Oh, really?
If you
breaking an ethics violation, or you'll get removed from
not an
owner,
ethic. No, but if you call if there's a building, it's got a sign on it with a broker, but it's not listed, and you call the owner of that building, is that?
I'm going to tell you this: license puts you in a really in a pickle without knowing who you're reaching out to on the other end. It really does. That's one of the things which is interesting that I say it like that, because at that time I was in the middle of working towards getting my real estate license. And then once I got that first phone call and then that second phone call, I was like, let me scrap that idea. I'm not even thinking about going down that path, because but it also, what it did, it turned those brokers into like my sourcing for me, right? Because I'm like, no, I'm an investor. I look at this, my firm, my partners, we look at X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden I became like the beautiful person in the bar, like all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, calm down, but it is something where I do have some preferred brokers that I work with. I do now look to partner with other people, primarily now, that are sourcing and looking at other operators and things like that, because as my role in my firm right now, I'm looking at doing some other strategic partnerships to increase our firm's positioning in certain things. And so it's allowing me to kind of get away from some of the day-to-day stuff and focus more on ensuring that I'm growing the business. And so I look for now partners, kind of like Trevor, other people in the country that are doing high-end things and using and leveraging their expertise. And that's how I'm kind of coming on more on the capital raising side more than before. And then now also, when people need more of like an operations kind of guy, then they kind of reach out to me and I try to come in and help out in those situations as well.
So, Angel, how do you see your daughters being involved in your business down the road? You had to have thought about it, right? I know none of them are old enough yet.
Let's not even. That's where you went wrong.
Happening now?
They're doing
it happening now.
Yeah,
what are they doing?
Yeah, so like one of the things I'll tell you, man, and this goes to anybody with kids. Get the earlier they start, the better. And I say it like that not because like I have a blueprint that all of a sudden now lets me know that my daughters are going to be like moguls in 25 years, 30, 50 years. But what I'll say is like this: I truly, when I go on tours, especially if I know it's not a site where it's dangerous, because there are industrial sites that I have no businesses bringing my daughters near because there's so many different things that can go sideways. But there is some industrial flex stuff that is more retail on the top. Apartments on the top, retail at the bottom, things like that. So when you are looking at doing that specifically, I like to bring them on the tours. So I start by bringing them. So my daughter, my oldest, has probably been on more tours than more people that I know in some of the what would I call it? Some of the masterminds I've been part of. My daughter knows more. Just thought you should know. The other component of it is that I think about is we talk about it around them as much as possible. So what I mean by that is like when I'm having actually it was funny, right before I came on with you guys, I was in the middle of a call. And I had my earpods in, but my daughters were right there. And instead of being like, get out of the room or whatever, I'm walking and talking the deal with as they're standing right there. I'm walking. I'm like, well, the underwriting has to be right in this and that and the other and whatever. But these words, because my daughters every now and then be like, Dad, what's underwriting? And you're like, well, let me explain what that means. Like you get these random what these things are. And so I try to answer it. And then the last way that I really try to get them involved, and this is probably, we did it the most with our youngest child. Our youngest child, anytime we did networking events, investor dinners, because my wife and I, we really try to do something every quarter where we really get, especially like here in Colorado, like our investors tend to be in different pockets, like Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, Denver. So what we would do is we would do investor dinners and we would bring our daughter. And it was interesting that our youngest daughter would actually sleep better when all the noise and the chaos was happening around her at these events. And then as soon as it got quiet, she would like freak out. And so we were like, bring her to another event. And so I would just say that if you can incorporate them early and often, it's especially as a girl dad, like I look at it as, I don't want them to think that this is good old boys business or whatever. I want them to think that it's touchable, reachable, and if they only know that as part of their life, it won't be so daunting to talk about it later in life. And that's the same thing we think about with financials. My wife and I, thinking, because my wife worked for one of the largest banks in the country for about 20 years almost before transitioning to the number one wealth management firm in the country. And so when I say that she talks about financials and all those kinds of things in front of our daughters, we do. And we intend to all the way through.
That's so awesome, man.
And how was that in comparison to how you were brought up?
Complete opposite.
And let's hear that
My
story.
wife and I come from Panama, smaller town community, barrio type living. My wife came from a farm. We didn't talk. Our families don't talk financials. They don't talk about anything that has like any hair on it. Like quite frankly, we actually had this discussion. One of my relatives and I, where I'm like, our family has this flight idea, like it's fight or flight, and it's like a flight. As soon as they think about talking money, talking about any politics, anything, my family like just like bolts. And I'm like, that is the complete wrong thing, because then when I got to college, one of the detriments that happened to me was the fact that like I felt ill prepared in some ways. I did not talk about money. I did not understand credit. I did not know. And think about this. I'm a banking guy and I had to be like, learn through experiences while working in the bank. So that's how I learned about mortgages and all that stuff, was because I was in it. Well, most people don't have that opportunity, and I did. And so I look at it as, why did it take me till I'm in my mid 20s to understand financials, where my parents could have brought me up understanding it so that I didn't feel like I was so far behind everybody else. And so this is kind of my way of, and my wife's way of saying, we're going to do it different than our parents did. We're going to take some of the great family dynamics of love, time, all this stuff, and we're going to amplify the business, the politics, all that other stuff, because they cannot be out there ill prepared and from the standpoint of like what we can control. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Are you doing anything in particular to teach them the value of money? It's something that I've been trying to work on. I know it's like a kind of an opaque question, but like, my daughter, she asked me the other day, like, why I can't, we went into a store, and she's at this phase now where she's like, every time we go into a store, she wants me to buy her something. And I'm kind of like exercising some discipline and being like, no, did you bring your money? Did you bring money with you? You have a piggy bank. And she's like, no. And then she asked me, like, why can't you just buy me one thing when we go to a store, right? Like so I've been trying to work on ways to get her to understand. She just thinks people have money, like you just have it, like what are you doing there?
So it's funny you say it like that you're at that stage, because my wife actually had that encounter with our daughter a couple of weeks back where we ran out of milk and then and bananas. Sorry, it was milk and bananas. Everything else we have. My daughter goes to my wife. She goes, you can go, or can you get some milk and bananas? And she's 2. And my wife's like, well, I got to go to the store. She goes, Mom, you have a phone. Hello. And I was like, oh, because her mom we got Amazon packages like every day. And so I just started. I was like, I didn't even know they did that.
Is this a thing that you guys do? Did you see someone doing that?
So it made me laugh, because I was just like, hey, honey, you might want to watch what you're doing in front of the kids. No more Amazon in front of the kids. But I would say, to answer your actual question, which is kind of interesting, because it was my wife's idea out of my frustration that it started. And here's the magic. So we've been trying to potty train, and I can't stand I can't stand having my daughters peeing all over the ground. It was driving me crazy. And I understand. And my wife's super patient. She's like, well, we have to make a choice. Like, what kind of parenting do we do? Are we more the people that yell? Are we the people that spank? Are we the people that time out? Are we the people that encourage? So my wife and I have come at it like we try to talk to our kids, level with them, get in their eye level. Like we try to like do it in a more positive mindset, because that's just not, again, how we were raised. So we were trying to do a better version of that. And I have a psychology background from my education component. And so like for me, like I think about it like an experiment, like in some aspects. And so my wife and I, we had this experiment. It was with the, what do they call it? Not the jelly beans, but, whatever, gummy bears. So what we did is every time they go to use a potty, they would get a gummy bear. And if every time they pottied themselves, they would have to take it. So we have 3 jars. Each girl has a jar, and then we have a jar, A and B jar. So my girl's name's Addison, Brinley, and then mom and dad are Angel and Brittany. So A and B jar is anytime they don't do it right, it goes from their jar to our jar. What we did not realize that happened was they started counting. They started doing math. Like, and I mean like, not counting 1, 2, 3. They're like, Dad, I got 5. And all of a sudden I'm like, what happens if I take away? We got 4. And so they started doing lists, and they're 2 and 3. So understand the byproduct of this like jar system, which we did not intend. We were just like, and it got them excited, right? About peeing and doing all this.
I'm gonna implement this. We're going through his pod training right now too. Keep going. Dude, please continue.
Dude, take this to the bank, because then this is what happened. We ran out of freaking gummy bears. And we didn't anticipate this because we had tons of gummy bears, and we're like, okay. And so then my daughters were like, well, if you don't have gummy bears for us, we don't want to go. So they started having accidents again. And we're like, you've got to be kidding me. So we got frustrated. Then my wife had this genius idea. She goes, they always talk about when we go to the store, to your point, Trevor, they always want my kids are like notorious for asking for suckers. Even from the time point, every time we take our kid to and we made this mistake, we take her to school, we drive by the gas station, like, we got a potty. So we kept stopping the potty, not realizing in the beginning that what she was doing is quantifying the fact that pottying at the gas station meant she could get a treat. And we were like, oh, snap, we can't do this anymore. So we stopped doing that. And my wife goes, well, we're out of gummy bears. We don't want to go to the store. They always want suckers. Let's teach them money. So we play now in dimes and quarters. So now we have the same jar system. And we say, every time you potty, you get a dime. If you're good for the whole day, you get a quarter. And so then all of a sudden my daughter's like, well, I want a quarter. So today, as I walked by, my daughter was, I get a quarter and a sucker today because I have enough money. I was like, my 3-year-old just cracked me up as I'm walking by, and I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. Which is funny because I told you guys I was on the phone. So imagine hearing that and you just want to die laughing, but it was kind of like one of those things where you're like, okay, we did this. But the jar system, probably the best thing we ever did.
Can you like take a picture of your jars?
Yeah. And by the way, the jars are like this big, and they have like a plastic, and I will take a picture and I send it to you, Trevor. But the picture on the front of it is just like a black marker, like it's like a chalk, you can write with chalk on it. So that's how we wrote their letters of their names on there. And so then so
you have 2 jars, one for them, one for you. And
yeah, they each have a jar, and then we have a jar. So the minus goes to our jar.
I wonder if I can get my son to eat it.
So you add and subtract from the jar. And so there's like a bank of gummy bears or quarters somewhere else that the money, right, goes into their jar and then gets taken out at times and goes into yours, right?
Yeah.
I get in the system right?
Yep, you got in the system right.
Yeah, this is great. The only thing that I'm jealous about this is that I don't think my son will eat a gummy bear.
Well, you'll do it with Slim Jim.
Okay, so I'll do Slim Jim. There you go. There you go.
Slim Jims are bomb. The original Slim Jim.
Oh my
god, dude! It tastes delicious.
We can talk about Slim Jims on a later call, but for the potty training. So, and the 3-year-old and the 2-year-old are both going through this right now.
Yep.
And the 1-year-old, and there's 1-year-old also, or she's
no,
young for this.
She just started walking like the last couple of weeks, so we haven't gotten her to the jar mechanism, but she's getting a pass for right now. But believe me, the moment that I see the opening, a jar is coming.
Oh man,
it's great. It's great.
What else do you use these jars for other than potty training? Are they only for potty training right now?
Really, believe me, the jars were not intended for the potty training thing, but that's where it's used and never used for anything else other than that now. But I live in Colorado, so that wasn't the initial intent.
I'll say they get it. Your oldest gets a quarter if she has a good date. You mean that if she doesn't if she doesn't have an accident all day long?
She can't have an accident the whole day to get that.
I find it interesting on these stories of the potty training, the different methods that parents go through. My son, my wife and I had the same conversations. What kind of parents are we? How are we struggling on this? Or what are we doing different? And one of them was, because we took his diaper off and he just held it for like 3 days, 2 days.
Whoa.
And we're just like watching him like wiggle around. We knew he had to go. And he's just like, just refusing it. And we're just like trying to help him. But we're also like, gosh, we really like kind of push ourselves into a corner, because we knew he had to go so bad. So it was like, anyway, but I just see how parents work through these things. So it's just so interesting.
Wow.
There's so many ways up the
That's
mountain.
nuts. Yeah.
Hey, Angel, I am going to ask you this. We're pretty close here on time. So, are you, I saw you given a nod. We can wrap it up right now. I've got a hard stop here in about 10 minutes also. Do you have any, last stories of great wisdoms, any big challenges? You gave us some pretty big ones already. So if you got anything else, we'd love to hear them, or we can kind of wrap it up.
I actually think that this is kind of an important component that I will mention. And I call it my piece of advice, or it's my motto also for my podcast. But I think about relationships. And this is one of the reasons I bring this up, is that I imagine that most of our listeners and people have been in part of a mastermind or kind of a group or whatever it looks like. And one of the things that I always find as dangerous is the people that really think about people as volume, right? Like they get into these groups or they get into these conferences or whatever, and they all just go spraying rapid fire at everybody and just trying to see who they can talk to. And then they come back like, hey, did you meet anybody? Oh, I met 100 people. And you're like, okay, got it. And the reason I bring that up is this. I think that with relationships and the people that you really get max value, get to partner with through these different things, is you got to go deeper. You got to make sure that you don't keep things surface level. You really got to make sure that if you want to find a good person to co-GP with, a good sponsor, whatever that looks like you got to make sure you understand who's on the other side and the kind of DNA and value systems that they have. Well, how are you going to do that? You're not going to do that by just knowing a little bit about them. And what I'm getting at is that when you are doing conferences, when you are doing different things, when you are thinking about any type of network event, investor dinners, whatever, really take the time to maybe refine that more than going after 100, maybe your top 3 to 5 people you want to meet and get to know and build a relationship with, because that's kind of what happened to me earlier today. One of the events that I went to, I ended up today with those couple of people that I thought were valuable, and we got to spend 4.5 hours or so together. So all I'm saying is that take seriously the opportunity to really build the right relationships if you really want to make sure you maximize the ability not only to have people in your corner when it comes to your family dynamic and being a parent and other people that can help you with their the ways and things that they're doing, but also being able to get a lot out of the business component by really being intentional in your relationships.
Well said. I always say that, you want to be close enough to be able to text them anytime about whatever you're going through, then you're kind of in, or get them on the golf course. Get some of those deeper conversations. I will comment. This is one of the great things about this podcast is we've been able to talk to guys about things that are a little closer to the heart, a little more harrowing. I mean, we're not just talking about like basis point spreads and, some of these, unfortunate, I mean, the business metrics we all go through, but it allows a little bit of a better connection to get a more real touch with someone. And that's the reason that we've actually really enjoyed doing this.
No, and I enjoyed this with you guys, especially being able to talk about the potty trading, all these different things, because these are the things that a lot of guys don't get an opportunity. And I don't mean guys and gals, but I mean just people in general don't get a real opportunity to talk outside of the business, some of the real life dynamics. And this is great about this podcast, good about you guys being open to talking about those things, because it's the things that matter. It's the things that, quite frankly, to me, is the why. It's why do we buy?
That's why we do all the other work. Absolutely.